Of all Irish myths, the legend of the cattle raid is the most mysterious. It tells of a ruthless warrior queen and a bloodthirsty quest for power. But it is more than just a violent fairy tale. It holds the key to an ancient world. Long ago, the land of Connacht in the west of Ireland was ruled by Maeve, a proud and fearsome warrior queen. One night, as she and her king lay together in bed, they began to compare riches. Both had great wealth, but even when scribes and accountants were summoned to the royal chamber, it seemed that they were equal in all things, except for one. The king's magic white bull. According to the laws of the time, all marriages were controlled by the wealthier partner. But Maeve had vowed never to yield her power, so she set out to find an even greater treasure for herself. Queen Maeve knew that the men of Ulster owned such a prize, a magical brown bull, said to be the most valuable in all Ireland. But when her offer of great riches for the animal was refused, Maeve vowed she would take it by force. In her heart, the queen knew she could never defeat Ulster's proud warriors in battle. But then, news arrived that they had fallen under a magic spell. An ancient curse declared that when Ulster was attacked, its men would be overcome by the pangs of childbirth, helpless to defend themselves. The agony, it was said, would last not hours or days, but months. And while the curse lasted, the magic bull lay unprotected. So calling her warriors together, Maeve advanced on Ulster. One warrior alone stood between Maeve and her prize, a tall, muscular youth called Cuchalain. As he was only 17, and not yet a man, he was unaffected by the curse which afflicted his countrymen. So he alone guarded the gateway to Ulster, a narrow river ford here at Cooley, the Gap of the North. As her warriors reached the river ford, the warrior queen looked down from her horse and laughed at the mere boy who stood against her mighty army. Quickly she dispatched one of her men to cut the youth into ribbons so that her forces could march onward into Ulster. But Cuchalain was no ordinary warrior. His great strength, his deadly aim, and his mastery of many weapons made him a terrible foe. In the blink of an eye, Maeve's champion lay dead. Others followed, but again and again the bravest of her warriors fell beneath Cuchalain's sword. Finally, Maeve commanded her troops to attack in force, but once more, she had underestimated her foe. A mortal of supernatural birth, Cuchalain possessed the power of the warp spasm, a magical force which rendered him grotesque to look at, but invincible in battle. As Maeve's warriors approached, they watched as the hideous transformation began. One of Cuchalain's eyes shrank to the size of a pinhead, while the other bulged insanely from his skull. His hair rose into razor-sharp spikes. His bones and muscles twisted and contorted beneath his skin until he became a monstrous ogre filled with rage. and hungry for slaughter. With a blood-curdling roar, Cuchulain charged forward, wielding his great battle axe with such madness and fury that the mutilated bodies of Maeve's warriors soon lay 6 deep at his feet. And so, legend records that battle as the sixfold slaughter. At first, Maeve commanded her army with honor, rallying her troops and praising their bravery. But as the days turned to weeks and the weeks to months, she became desperate. She taunted, threatened, even seduced her warriors into battle, only to see each one butchered by the mighty Cuchulain. Finally, Maeve resorted to treachery. Leaving the battlefield, she sought out Cuchulain's beloved foster brother and lied to him. Cuchulain, she said, had dismissed him as a coward and a weakling. Now he was forced to fight for his honor, brother against brother. They were, it was said, equally matched in strength and skills. A duel between them would be a fight to the death. And Maeve knew that even if Cuchulain survived, he would be too weak to defend himself against her army, and victory would be hers. Soon, as the Queen had planned, the brothers faced one another on the field of combat. For 3 days, they fought like wild animals. Sparks flew from their swords. The air was filled with blood and sweat. Secretly, each night, they tended each other's wounds. Each morning, their savage conflict began again. But on the 4th day, as the dust of battle cleared, Maeve's champion lay dead, cradled in the arms of his sorrowful brother. With Cuchulain distracted by grief, Maeve readied her forces to charge through the gap of the north. But suddenly, a thick mist filled with thunder and lightning rose up. It was the army of Ulster, finally released from their curse. So great was their number, it was said, their breath formed a mist. The pounding of their feet echoed like thunder. Their weapons flashed like lightning. With a terrifying roar, the 2 armies clashed. Cuchulain fighting on one side, Maeve herself on the other. The carnage was immense. Corpses littered the battlefield. The air echoed to the sound of splitting bone and the clash of metal. In one blow, Maeve's spear killed 100 men. But at the height of battle, she came face to face with Cuchulain. As the Queen began to plead for her life, Cuchulain dismissed her. "I do not kill women." But the deafening clash of swords and shields had driven the magic brown bull into Maeve's camp. And as her army fled from the slaughter, they drove the bull ahead of them. According to legend, as Maeve approached her homeland, the brown bull of Ulster charged forth to fight the white bull of Connacht. All night, both armies looked on as the great beasts struggled. The ground heaved and split as they lunged and spun around, locked together in fury. Blood spilled across the soil as they gored and slashed at one another with their mighty hooves and horns. At dawn, the bloodiest battle in the history of Ireland had come to a bitter end. Both magical bulls lay dead. And so the tale ends. But what does it mean? Could the saga of Cuchalain and Maeve be more than just a legend? The Táin Bó Cúailnge, the bloody battle between Maeve, the warrior queen, and the mighty Cuchalain, is the oldest and most infamous legend in Irish mythology. It has been told and retold by generations of storytellers. But did it ever happen? And what could it mean? The legend is enshrined in the 800-year-old manuscript where it was first written down, the Book of Leinster. The book is a national treasure. It records the legends of a remarkable time. Its pages speak of kings and great dynasties, ferocious battles and mysterious supernatural powers. Since the medieval era, it has fascinated and intrigued all who read it. But though the book itself dates from the 12th century, the legends it contains, including the Táin Bó Cúailnge, the Battle of Cuchalain and the Warrior Queen, belong to another time. A time as ancient to 12th century writers as the Middle Ages are to us now. They were the heroic tales of the Celts, a civilization whose legacy can still be felt in Ireland today.
Why do we think of Ireland to this day as such a great Celtic place, such a distinctively Celtic, almost republic? The reason for that is that the Romans never got to Ireland, so we are not a Romanized country like the Celts of Britain become completely Romanized. Irish history is about cattle, so that the whole idea of raiding cattle, the whole idea of the Táin Bó Cúailnge, Queen Maeve, that completely is Celtic. Even though that's legend and myth and all the rest of it, there is in all of that a faint echo of historical, social, cultural fact of the time around Christ, when the Celts were at the height of their culture in Ireland.
It was a time when cattle were the ultimate expression of wealth and status. Celtic chieftains would go to any lengths, and countless wars were fought for control of the greatest herds. In the mythology of the Celts, cattle were also given a place of honor. Like the magical bulls of legend, they were more than simply mortal creatures.
Bulls were introduced into the epic because they dramatized it. The great opposition of the dark bull and the white bull, fighting it out, if you like, as a sort of a subplot to the main battle. And these two bulls have divine names. One of them is called Down, the dark one, who was the god of the dead. And the other is called Fionn, the bright, wise one, who was the god of light.
From the ferocious weapons which have survived from their time, we know the Celts also glorified their warriors. They lived to fight. Even in peace, they reveled in epic tales of mortal combat and past glories. And yet, for over 1,000 years, not one of these tales was ever written down. All Celtic knowledge was preserved in the memory of the Filii, or bards, the storytellers of their day. But even though the Celts did not write the chronicle of their time, others did. From the written accounts of Roman historians and later Christian scribes, we know that Ireland was made up of fierce, independent dynasties. History records many great struggles for power and sovereignty among the Irish Celts. The legendary Battle of Maeve and Cuchalain may have been one such struggle.
The question of whether there ever was such a war as the cattle raid of Cooley is an interesting one. I think there was a war unto which these mythical figures became attached in storytelling, because the Celtic kingdom of East Ulster was in about the 4th century AD overthrown by a Celtic kingdom from the Midlands, and this war, I think, is the basis of the tradition of the epic.
And yet, even though the legend may have had an actual historical counterpart, the events it describes seem just too outlandish to be true. Could there be any truth behind Cuchalain's fearsome transformation in battle? Could the legendary violence and magic of the tale be anything other than pure myth? With its magical beasts and superhuman warriors, the ancient legend of Cuchalain and the warrior queen seems to belong more to the world of the imagination than history. In a way, this is true. Celtic art is one of Ireland's most enduring legacies, but its spirals and strange, abstract designs speak of a people who are more interested in fantasy than reality. In their storytelling, too, the Celts took very little at face value. In their great hero tales, the Celtic bards preserved myth as well as history. And so, like Cuchalain, the heroes themselves were often part mortal and part supernatural. Cuchalain, as the legend goes, had the power to transform into a terrifying creature, bloodthirsty in battle and demented with rage. His muscles were said to twist and warp beneath his skin as he became an invincible, misshapen killer. This, it was said, was a magical power known as a wolf spasm.
The fighting Celts are supposed to have been phenomenal fighters, and I mean, that tradition goes on in the modern mythology of our own time, where the Irish in the Union Army and all of that in America and all of that, the Fighting 69, all have a great reputation. A lot of that could be exaggerated, but certainly the classical writers like Posidonius, writing in the 1st century BC, he describes the Celts as going into battle naked to the world. Sometimes their bodies, by the way, weren't fully naked. They were painted in kind of blue woad or whatever to make them look fearsome.
According to Roman records, these Celtic warriors would work themselves into demented blood frenzies before entering battle. Showing no fear, they fought like wild animals, and always to the death. This is what the legendary warp spasm of Cuchalain celebrates. But whether the magical warrior was a myth or an historical fact, we may never know. Like the figure of its great hero, the truth behind the legend has always been elusive. Over the centuries, the saga of the cattle raid has been interpreted in many ways. After it was written down, some believed that the events it described spoke of the present as well as the past.
This great story served two functions in the Middle Ages. First of all, the chieftains, who were often fighting small little wars against each other and raiding each other's cattle, they liked to think that they were like the great heroes of old in the great cattle raid. They liked to flatter themselves that their deeds were warlike and that they were great men. Also, the learned caste and the poets liked to tell a story like this because it gave them the illusion that they had an epic to be compared with the epics of the Greeks, like the Iliad and the Odyssey, that just as the Greeks had Ulysses and Hercules, that the Irish poets had Cuchalain and Maeve.
Like Cuchalain, the figure of Maeve could have been based on fact. Celtic women were notoriously warlike, and according to history, many shared the same aggressive instincts and political power as their men. But still, the warrior queen is an enigma. In the legend of the cattle raid, she is described as the Queen of Connacht, a title which once existed. Yet outside the legend, history makes no mention of her. So who or what could have inspired the creation of such a formidable woman? Maeve, the warrior queen, is still one of the most mysterious figures of Irish legend. Even though history proves the existence of many female warriors among the Celts, no reference has ever been made to the great Queen of Connacht. In fact, it is not the history, but the religion of the Celts that holds the key to her identity. As pagans, the Celts worshipped a great hierarchy of gods and goddesses. These spirits presided over warfare. They controlled the forces of nature and held sway over the fertility of the land. One supernatural being, however, governed the most important ritual of the Celtic world. The seat of her power, it was believed, was not Connacht, but the royal precinct of Tara, the most important ritual site in Celtic Ireland. She was the goddess of kingship, and without her blessing, no warrior could be elected as ruler of his people. The name of this goddess was Maeve. Many claim that she and the legendary warrior queen were one and the same.
Well, the type of person that Maeve was is very interesting. Her name, first of all, meant she who intoxicates. It's the same word as you have in mead for drink. And Maeve was really the goddess of sovereignty, the goddess of the land. The land of Ireland was seen by ancient people as being female, a woman. And when the king was being installed, the ritual was that he was to become the husband of the lady land. And as her husband, he had to look after the country.
After the 5th century, with the coming of Christianity and the written language of Latin, many Celtic legends were preserved in manuscript form for the first time. But first, they had to be adapted for a Christian audience. The pagan gods were too important to the Irish to be banished completely, yet too powerful a threat to the Christian doctrine. So they were demoted from spirits to perishable mortals, with human powers and human weaknesses.
When the medieval writers began to write up the epics into great personalities like Maeve and Cnachur and the rest of them, they of course wanted to dramatize her. So this dim memory of a woman who caused great wars and great contentions, she was turned into a sort of virago, a woman who was crazy for power.
No longer worshipped as a goddess, Maeve came to represent an entirely different female symbol, conniving and unscrupulous, responsible for the death of her men. In effect, the medieval Christian writers had cast her in the role of Eve to Cuchalain's Adam, once again laying the blame for humanity's downfall at the feet of a woman.
The myth of Maeve and Cuchalain are myths, but they probably are reasonable echoes of events that took place maybe around the time of Christ or slightly before. We know, for instance, that the great mythological site of the kings of Ulster was at Owenmucha in South Armagh. We know that site to be there to this day. As archaeologists, we have excavated that site, and we know that there was a huge, gigantic wooden temple there.
2,000 years ago, it was believed that Maeve's spirit inhabited the whole island of Ireland. To the Celts, she was the goddess of the land itself. In Ireland, even now, her memory is surrounded by superstition. One ancient folktale claims that her soul rests inside an ancient Celtic grave, here at Knocknaree, in County Sligo. But according to the legend of the cattle raid, the center of her power was here, the Celtic temple of Cuchalain, in the heart of Connacht. Beneath this ancient mound, it is said, lies her tomb. But the truth, like her legend, is shrouded in mystery. Because to this day, no one has dared disturb this land. Grace O'Malley, the pirate queen of Ireland. A fearless buccaneer. A heroine who defied every convention of her time. A legend erased from the pages of Irish history. The name of Grace O'Malley, the 16th century pirate queen, is famous throughout Ireland, and yet according to Irish history, she did not exist. As it has been passed down, the legend tells of a young girl anxious to go to sea, who took herself off to the high cliffs of the west coast. Here she cut off her hair to look like a boy. When she returned home, her sea captain father declared that this was a true O'Malley, fit to learn the ways of the sea. And for her impudence, he called her Granuaile, in Irish, the bald one. By the age of 16, Grace had become a beautiful woman, a skillful mariner, and a leader of great cunning. Her first marriage to a warrior leader, Donal O'Flaherty, forged a powerful alliance for the O'Malley clan. Soon, she would bear 3 children. Grace now controlled the O'Flaherty castle, here in the west of Ireland. From here, it is said, at the helm of her own galley, she embarked on a life of piracy. At sea, she raided wealthy merchant ships. On land, she defied the colonial laws of the English, who occupied and controlled Ireland at that time. But even as Grace and her family prospered, a bitter feud was about to take its toll. One day, while he was hunting near his home, assassins from a rival clan ambushed and killed Grace's husband. The killers then looked to Grace's castle, intending to seize it for themselves. But they hadn't reckoned on the fighting spirit of the pirate queen. As the story goes, Grace defended her clan's fortress with such ferocity that she quickly defeated the attackers. Those who managed to escape fled in terror, never to return. And from that day forth, the island fortress was renamed Hen's Castle, in honor of its formidable mistress. In time, Grace remarried. Her second husband, Richard Burke, was a notorious Irish rebel, and while he fought the English on land, Grace continued her life at sea, where she gave birth to her 4th child, Tibbet na Lung, Toby of the ships. Even as Grace nursed her newborn son below decks, a notorious band of Turkish pirates laid siege to her galley, overwhelming her crew. Grace leapt to her feet, and with a defiant yell, she stormed into battle. Suddenly, the tables were turned. In minutes, the pirate queen and her men had slaughtered the entire Turkish crew and set their ship adrift. After 1 year of marriage, Grace had everything she wanted from her new husband: the loyalty of his clan and the control of his stout fortress. One day, it is said, as he returned from yet another skirmish with the English, he found the gates were locked against him. Looking up, he saw why. High on the battlements stood Grace. With a wave of her hand, she announced, "I dismiss you." According to ancient Irish law, she was now divorced, and as a parting blow, she declared the castle now belonged to her. Legend tells us that Grace O'Malley lived a double life. On land, she would pretend to submit to the colonial laws of the English, even swearing her allegiance to the crown. But at sea, she defied them. She raided cargo from their wealthy merchant ships. She extracted tolls in exchange for safe passage. And she scoured the treacherous seacoast, looting any shipwreck she found. Finally, a rival chieftain betrayed Grace to the English, and for months she languished in Dublin Castle on a charge of piracy. An offense punishable by death. But somehow, even in the face of execution, Grace prevailed. Whether by bribery or by seducing her prison guard, she escaped the hangman's noose and returned to her beloved home on the west coast. Even as Grace rejoiced in her freedom, a new threat was looming. The Queen of England had appointed a sadistic new governor to the west of Ireland, Sir Richard Bingham, a man consumed by hate for the pirate queen and determined to end her reign at any cost. By the late 16th century, England controlled most of Ireland. The last hope for the Irish was an alliance with England's arch-enemy, Spain. In the summer of 1588, the Spanish king, Philip II, sent the Armada, a massive fleet of warships, to destroy the Royal Navy. But the fleet was doomed. Storms and high seas battered the Armada as it traveled north. Finally, the English Navy outmaneuvered and destroyed it. Many of the crippled galleons ran aground on the west coast of Ireland. Fearing rebellion, Governor Bingham forbade any contact between the Irish and the Spanish survivors, on pain of death. Even in these dark times, Grace's defiance knew no bounds. When a Spanish galleon was dashed to pieces near her castle, it said she secretly rescued one of the survivors. Risking a charge of high treason, she smuggled him to safety, saving him from almost certain death. Soon afterwards, Grace and the fugitive became lovers. Their joy, however, was short-lived. During this time, Governor Bingham was building up the evidence he needed to hang Grace. He used every means to tempt her into open rebellion. He imposed harsh taxes. His troops raided her land. Finally, he arranged the murder of her new lover and one of her sons. But still, Grace's legendary courage won out. In a stroke of defiant genius, she went over Bingham's head and appealed directly to his supreme commander, Elizabeth I, Queen of England. No other Irish chieftain would have dared meet face to face with the English queen. But without hesitation, legend has it, Grace set sail for London, the heart of the very empire which had dispossessed her people. Ireland's pirate queen would confront England's virgin queen. Arriving at Elizabeth's castle in London, It's said that Grace stalked barefoot into court, wearing the ceremonial dress of an Irish chieftain. Behind her stood a retinue of warriors, tall as oaks, who overshadowed the demure ladies-in-waiting and courtiers of the English royal household. Grace and Elizabeth conversed for hours, one queen to another. Noticing that the foul city air of London was causing her guest to sneeze, we are told that the pale and haughty Elizabeth offered Grace a lace handkerchief. After blowing her nose, Grace threw the handkerchief into the fire, in the Irish custom. The court was shocked. A gift from the Queen of England should be shown more respect, Grace was told. And besides, the English put soiled handkerchiefs back in their pockets. Defiant as ever, Grace announced that, unlike the English, her people were civilized and would never indulge in such a disgusting practice. Despite this impudence, it's said that Grace charmed Elizabeth, who pardoned all her crimes, ordering that her wealth and territory be restored. But Grace's troubles were far from over. Back on the remote west coast of Ireland, Governor Bingham was furious. Behind Elizabeth's back, he imposed even harsher taxes and placed whole battalions of soldiers on Grace's land to ruin her. Soon, Grace and her people were impoverished. In desperation, she fled her fortress, seeking refuge with the rebels who planned to rid Ireland of the English forever. Just as Bingham had hoped, Grace had branded herself a traitor. If captured, the pirate queen would surely hang. How could her legendary courage save her now? Grace O'Malley, a powerful, defiant woman, a fearless rebel, a thorn in the side of the world's most powerful empire. According to the historians of 16th century Ireland, she was a myth. And yet, for 4 centuries, the memory of the pirate queen has lived on. Could the legend be true?
The proofs relating to the existence of Grace O'Malley are all contained in mouldy old manuscripts, 400 odd years old. Also, proof is there in terms of the remains of her castles, and perhaps most importantly of all, her 13th great-grandson, Lord Altamont in Westport House, is still alive and well and living in Ireland today.
Grace O'Malley, or Granuaile as she was sometimes known in Ireland, was my 13th great-grandmother, and she was married to Richard Burke. We're very proud of the fact, really, that we are descended from this remarkable woman who lived in the 16th century, and it was a very male-orientated century. It was a century of adventure when men were going all over the world and making discoveries. It was very unusual in those days to find a woman who led thousands of men in this very strong way.
The 16th century was a bleak chapter in the history of Ireland. Since 1515, most of the island had come under the control of England, and the colonial stranglehold tightened year by year. On the rugged west coast, the last bastion of the native Irish, a ruthless mission was underway. Its aim, to destroy all trace of Irish culture. In time, even the Irish language would be outlawed. Resistance of any kind was met with brutal force. This was no place for rebels. And yet, the figure of Grace O'Malley dates from this same time. Here was the leader of a powerful tribal alliance, a mistress of many castles, a pirate queen and a law unto herself, a woman who, according to the conventions of her time and the annals of Irish history, should never have existed.
She was daring, fearless in adversity. She was the most shrewd and able and tactician and politician. She was a mother, a lover, a wife twice over. She led a private army by land and sea for the space of 60 years, but unlike other women leaders of her time before and after, was physically involved and led from the front. And I think the great tribute to her is that the men of the period were prepared and agreeable to be led by her by land and sea. It is quite extraordinary and perhaps in some way quite unexplainable.
To this day, Galway, the capital of the west of Ireland, is called the City of the Tribes, and inscribed on the gates of the old walled city, a 16th century English inscription reads,
"From the ferocious O'Flaherty's, good Lord deliver us."
This was the clan of Donal O'Flaherty, Grace's first husband, which was allied with the O'Malleys under her leadership. Many of the O'Flaherty fortresses still stand, even the legendary Hen's Castle, named in Grace's honour. But despite even this, the Pirate Queen has no place in Irish history. The chief historical records of Ireland, dating from the 16th century, are known as the Annals of the Four Masters. Among their pages, they list the names Donal O'Flaherty and Richard Burke, Grace's first two husbands. Their family histories, their rebellious exploits, even their deaths are related in minute detail. But Grace O'Malley's name never appears. Had it not been for the meticulous records of the English, the legend of the Pirate Queen would have ended here. One of the many documents that have survived from the court of Queen Elizabeth relates to an unusual incident. In a report dating from 1577, Lord Deputy Sir Henry Sidney, the Queen's representative in Ireland, recounts a meeting with
A most famous feminine sea captain, the most notorious woman in all the coasts of Ireland.
He even records her name, Gráinne ní Mhaol, in English, Grace O'Malley. Thanks to this evidence, we can be certain that the historical figure of the Pirate Queen is no myth. But still the mystery remains. Why was Grace O'Malley erased from the history of her own country? The events which surround the figure of Grace O'Malley are among the most significant of the 16th century. It was the time of Elizabeth I, the defeat of the Spanish Armada, the English colonization of Ireland. We can be absolutely certain of every detail. According to English history, the Pirate Queen certainly existed, but in Irish records she is never mentioned. Why?
Perhaps to some extent, down through the years, because she was a woman. In past times, she wasn't written up. She was down here in the west of Ireland, I think, as well. And the west of Ireland in the 16th century, I think, was very far west. I mean, it's only in recent years, really, that the west of Ireland has come quite so near to the rest of the world, in fact. So therefore, I think she was very far away from everywhere.
Of one thing we can be sure. The male historians of 16th century Ireland had every reason to resent Grace O'Malley. Not only did she violate Irish law by claiming the property of both her husbands, she was a powerful, independent woman in a man's world. Perhaps during the 16th century, Ireland was unwilling to admit that one of its greatest heroes was a woman. Despite Grace's absence from Irish history, the figure of Bingham, her arch-enemy, is well documented. We know that one Richard Bingham was appointed governor of Connacht, Grace's own province, in 1584. His mission was to subdue all resistance by the native Irish and to confiscate the land of all dissenters, to rule with an iron fist. Bingham's personal vendetta against the Pirate Queen knew no bounds. He imposed the most crippling of taxes. His troops harassed her people. And finally, he even arranged the kidnap of her beloved son. For the first time in her life, Grace was helpless.
Governor Bingham had got the better offer in Connacht, and perhaps was the only man in her life who actually ever did get the better offer. So she decided to go above his head and go to his boss, who happened to be Queen Elizabeth I in England. But before she actually met the Queen, she had to go through certain formalities, as anybody would today who wished to see a head of state, and certainly somebody as powerful as the Queen of England. Firstly, she would send to the Queen 5 petitions, so she actually bombarded the Queen with notices of her sad happenings that were happening to her in Connacht at the hands of Queen Elizabeth's governors there. Then she went on the last epic voyage of her long career, sailed up the Thames and hung about the court for the summer of 1593. Now, she did have a friend in court, Black Tom, Earl of Ormond, who happened to be a cousin of Queen Elizabeth, and he dropped a little note to the Queen's secretary. He, in turn, sent 18 articles of interrogatory to Grace O'Malley. And when she had answered these set of 18 questions, then Queen Elizabeth was ready to see her.
Now Grace had what she wanted, a chance to confront Bingham's supreme commander, the most powerful monarch of the 16th century world. And yet, Grace was an outlaw, the most notorious pirate of her day. What could she have hoped to gain here, alone in the heartland of her enemies? Justice or betrayal? Of all Grace O'Malley's notorious deeds, one stands out from all the rest. It is the most spectacular and most improbable exploit of her legendary career. As the story goes, it was her last great voyage, her confrontation with Queen Elizabeth I. Grace, after all, was a convicted enemy of the English crown, a pirate who had plundered the Queen's navy. As an Irish clan leader, Grace would have had little, if any, knowledge of English. She was a stranger in an unknown land. How could she have pleaded her case in the language of her enemies? We can only assume that the pirate queen enlisted the help of a translator, because, according to the records of Elizabeth's court, a remarkable document arrived in the summer of 1593. The language is described as being so eloquent, the appeal so well phrased, that Elizabeth granted an audience almost immediately. Legend relates that the pirate queen arrived in Elizabeth's court barefoot, resplendent in the ceremonial robes of an Irish chieftain, and surrounded by a guard of tall Irish warriors. But it is likely that Grace was dressed far more modestly, and accompanied only by her translator. The insolent burning of Elizabeth's handkerchief may also be closer to legend than fact. Some claim it symbolizes Grace's refusal of a royal title from Elizabeth, claiming, no doubt, that she was a queen already. The truth of the episode, though, remains a mystery. To this day, no written record of it has ever been found.
Grace O'Malley definitely met with the Queen. During my research, I came across the letter that Queen Elizabeth actually had written relating to the audience which she had with Grace O'Malley in about July 1593. And that letter is very important for many respects. Firstly, it shows what a shrewd negotiator Grace O'Malley was, because contrary to the wishes of the Queen's governors in Ireland, Grace O'Malley actually got everything she asked from the Queen.
Grace returned from London with her freedom, a heroine to her people. Her son was released, her lands restored. By rights, the rest of her life should have been spent in peace and safety. But despite her royal pardon, Richard Bingham secretly defied his queen, bringing all his powers to bear on the now defenseless Grace. Supported by her son, Grace lived out the rest of her days here, at the lonely castle of Rockfleet on the west coast of Ireland. The wealth and power which had once been hers were gone. Her days of piracy and defiance were over. For centuries, the exact location of Grace O'Malley's grave was unknown. Some claimed she was buried at Burrishoole, a 16th century abbey built by her second husband on the west coast. And yet, it seems likely that the body of Grace O'Malley lies closer to the place of her birth.
I think Grace's final resting place undoubtedly is in the Abbey on Clare Island, and I base my reason for saying that on the fact that I know exactly where her son, Tiboid Nalong, Toby off the Ships, is buried, and the tomb that was designed for him by his wife is almost identical to the tomb on the Abbey on Clare Island. And obviously it has to be somebody of great importance that is buried there, because it is a very ornate tomb and monument, and a suitable one to Grace O'Malley.
Legend has it that Grace died not in 1600, but in 1603, the year that saw the defeat of the Irish rebellion and the final triumph of the English, the year that marked the death of Queen Elizabeth I. It seems fitting that Grace O'Malley died with the era she fought to preserve. In truth and in legend, she was the last heroine of a proud culture. Even though this extraordinary woman was betrayed by the historians of her own time, the memory of her never faded. For 400 years it has been preserved in the poetry and the songs of Ireland. Grace O'Malley, the Pirate Queen, wrote herself into Irish history through the hearts and minds of her own people.